to the sacred Ternunald, and hence that there remained for Beelzebub only 2 gradations before attaining to the sacred Anklad. When the whole of this unusual ceremony neared its end, and before all those assembled had had time to recover their self-possession from their earlier joyful agitation, there suddenly and unexpectedly appeared on the horns of Beelzebub, quite independently, a 5th fork of a special form known to them all. Thereupon all, without exception, even the venerable archangel himself, fell prostrate before Beelzebub, who had now risen to his feet and stood transfigured with a majestic appearance, owing to the truly majestic horns which had arisen on his head. All fell prostrate before Beelzebub because by the 5th fork on his horns it was indicated that he had attained the reason of the sacred Padkulad, i.e. the last gradation before the reason of the sacred Anklad. The reason of the sacred Anklad is the highest to which in general any being can attain, being the 3rd in degree from the absolute reason of his endlessness himself. But the reason of the sacred Padkulad, to which Beelzebub had already perfected himself, is also very rare in the universe. Hence, even the venerable archangel prostrated himself before Beelzebub because his own degree of reason was as yet only that of the sacred Degindad, i.e., wanting 3 degrees to the reason of the sacred Anklad. When all had arisen to their feet, the venerable archangel, addressing this time all the assembled beings of the various natures, proclaimed, "Beings created by one Creator, we have all just become worthy to be the first to behold the final formation of the appearance of that which is the dream, both of all those present and of the beings in general of the whole of our great megalocosmos. And now, let us all together exult and rejoice over such a worthiness, which is for us such a revivifying shock for our ability to struggle against our own denying source, which ability alone can lead us to that sacred Padkulad attained by one of the sons of our common Father, who although he first transgressed on account of his youth, yet afterwards was able by his conscious labors and intentional sufferings to become worthy with his essence, to be one of the very rare sacred individuals of the whole of our great universe." After this proclamation of the archangel, all the beings, without exception, present on the spaceship Karnak, then began to sing the prescribed sacred canticle entitled, "I Rejoice." And when this last sacred canticle also had been sung, all the angels and cherubim with the venerable archangel at their head returned to the cosmic Ego Leonopti, which then left the ship Karnak and disappeared gradually into space, whereupon the passengers and crew began to disperse to their places, and the Karnak resumed its falling towards its destination. After the termination of the most great universal solemnity just described, Beelzebub and his grandson and his old servant Ahun, deeply moved like all the other passengers of the spaceship Karnak by this unexpected event, returned to that part of the ship where their talks proceeded concerning the men beings arising and existing on the earth. When Beelzebub, now with a transfigured appearance corresponding to his merits, and visible to all, had occupied his usual place, Ahun, the old servant, who had been close to him during almost the whole of his existence, unexpectedly fell prostrate before him and in a sincerely entreating voice began to speak. "Sacred Padkulad of our great megalocosmos, have mercy upon me and pardon me, an unfortunate ordinary 3-centered being, for my past disrespectful manifestations, voluntary and involuntary, toward your sacred essence. Have mercy and pardon me, just this three-centered being who, though he has existed a very long time, yet to his misfortune, only because in his preparatory age nobody aided the crystallization in him of the data for the ability of intensively actualizing being particle duty, had until now been so short-sighted that he had been unable to sense the reality present beneath an exterior with which, according to the common cosmic trogo-autoegocrat, all those existing and newly arising units of the megalocosmos are coated, who ought to have in their presence that sacred something which is called reason. Having said this, Ahun stood as if in a stupor of silent expectancy, and Beelzebub also in silence gazed at him with a look which, though perceived externally from without, was full of love and forgiveness. Yet there could be felt in it also his essence grief and inevitable resignation. During this afore-described scene, Hussein stood apart, in the posture everywhere called the posture of the all-famous universal hermit, Harnatulk Pararana, of the planet Kirmankshana. And when a little bit later Beelzebub cast his eyes around and noticed his grandson in the said posture, he turned to him and said, "What, my boy? Can it be that the same proceeds in your presence as in our old Ahun's?" To this question of Beelzebub's, Hussein also, in an uncertain tone unusual for him, timidly replied, "Almost, yes. Sacred Podkulad of our great megalocosmos. Only with this difference, that at this moment the impulse of love, both for our Ahun and for the three-brained beings of the planet Earth, now functions still more strongly in me. This impulse of love has become stronger in me evidently because, as it seems to me, both Ahun and the three-brained beings of the planet Earth have greatly aided me in becoming worthy to be a recent eyewitness of the great solemnity of him who is the cause of my arising, and whom hitherto I have called my dear grandfather, and who has already visibly become one of the sacred Podkulads of our great megalocosmos, before whom all will bow, and before whom I have at this moment the happiness to stand." Exclaimed Beelzebub, and having given his features the usual expression he was wont to assume during his sojourn on the earth, said, "First of all I wish to remark, and in the speech of Mullah Nazar ad-Din, whom I particularly honor, to voice the thought which arises by association concerning Ahun's words, which were not peculiar to him, and his assumed posture quite unusual for him. Our dear teacher in such a case would say, 'Don't shed tears in vain like that crocodile which snapped at the fisherman and missed biting off his lower left half.' And now first take your usual places and let us talk a little more. Although our ship is now entering the spheres of our planet Caritas, yet, as usually happens with spaceships, in order to exhaust the momentum they have acquired, a fairly long time will elapse before it stops at its destined mooring place." Hussein and Ahun immediately and silently proceeded to follow the suggestion of Beelzebub, though by their